All right, let's dive into one of the most powerful and honestly most overlooked tools a researcher has, the scientific abstract. We tend to think of it as just a summary, right? But it's so much more. It's your paper's handshake, its elevator pitch, and maybe most importantly, its bouncer at the front door. We're going to break down just how crucial this little paragraph really is.
And look, this isn't just me being dramatic. Check out this quote from a major journal. They are telling you, flat out, that the very first decision, whether your paper even gets a serious look, is based only on the abstract. It's not just a formality. It's the first and, you could argue, the most important hurdle you have to clear.
In fact, here's the real insider secret. A lot of reviewers will tell you that by the time they finish reading that abstract, they've pretty much made up their mind. If the abstract is weak or confusing, they'll spend the rest of the time just looking for flaws to justify a reject. But if it's strong, they become your ally, actively looking for reasons to push for accept. That's the secret power we're talking about today.
So the big question is, how do you write an abstract that puts you in that accept pile? Well, it's not some kind of dark art. It's actually a formula. Let's walk through a simple 5-part blueprint that takes all the mystery out of it.
Here it is. These are the 5 ingredients for a fantastic abstract. First, you set the stage. What's the problem and what's new about what you're doing? Then, you state your specific purpose. You briefly cover your methods, highlight your absolute best results, and finally, wrap it up with a conclusion and why it all matters. It's a perfect little roadmap for your reader.
Now the glue that holds this whole thing together? Transition words. Think of them as signposts on that roadmap. Phrases like, to alleviate this problem, or our analysis showed that, are so important. They guide the reader smoothly from one point to the next, making the whole thing feel logical and effortless to read.
Okay, theory is one thing, but let's see how this blueprint works in the wild. We're going to dissect a real abstract from the journal Bioresource Technology. And hey, don't get bogged down in the science here. Just focus on the structure and how each sentence is doing a specific job.
Okay, here we go. Part 1, the problem. See how they do it? They immediately give us the context, making IBE fuel. And then bam, here's the catch. A process called butanol inhibition makes the whole thing inefficient. The stakes are clear right from the jump.
And would you look at that, a perfect transition into part 2. See that phrase, to alleviate this problem? It's a bright, flashing signpost for the reader. It says, okay, we just told you the problem, now here's our solution. The purpose couldn't be clearer.
Next up, methods. Notice how lean this is. There's no fluff. It's just a straight-to-the-point description of how they did the work. 5 cycles, a specific bioreactor, a specific medium. It's just enough detail to show they did real science without getting lost in the weeds.
And now for the payoff, the results. But notice, they don't list every single finding. They cherry-pick the most impressive numbers, a 30% and 17% increase in productivity. This is the kind of data that makes a reviewer sit up and pay attention.
And they stick the landing with part 5. Again, that great transition word, finally. They state their main takeaway, and then they zoom out to tell us the bigger picture. They've introduced a whole new concept for a bioreactor. This tells the reader why the work is significant.
Okay, so we know what to do. But it's just as important, maybe even more so, to know what not to do. Let's shift gears and talk about some of the classic mistakes that can completely torpedo an otherwise great paper.
This is basically a checklist of red flags for reviewers. Vague statements, mentioning stuff that isn't even in the paper, those are immediate turnoffs. But one of the biggest no-nos is references. Your abstract has to stand completely on its own. And of course, keep it short and sweet. That 250-word limit is there for a reason. Just look at the difference here. On the left, it's a mess, cluttered with citations that break the flow. It's distracting. But on the right, it's so much cleaner. Instead of citing yourself, just say, in a previous work, we. Instead of citing a bunch of examples, just say, for example. The information is the same, but the delivery is way more professional.
Speaking of being concise, just how concise can you get? Let's try a fun little thought experiment. Here's an incredibly complicated paper title about, neutrinos potentially going faster than light. What do you think the abstract for a paper like this would be?
Yep, that's it. The entire abstract is 2 words. Now, obviously, this is a famous, kind of funny example, but it makes the point better than anything else. Be direct. Get straight to the answer. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is also the shortest.
All right, so you've nailed the abstract. It's perfect. But how do you make sure people can actually find your paper in the first place? That's where two other critical pieces come into play: your keywords and highlights.
Your keywords are so important for searchability. Look at how they evolved here. The first draft is okay, but kind of generic. The final version, though, is super specific. Words like cell immobilization and sugarcane bagasse are exactly what another specialist in this field would be searching for. You have to think like the person you want to read your paper.
A lot of journals now have a highlights section. The best way to think about these is as your paper's elevator pitch in bullet points. They show up right on the article's webpage and are designed to grab a scrolling reader's attention instantly. You want to communicate your most exciting, game-changing findings in just a few quick, punchy lines.
So, we've covered the what, the how, and the why of a great abstract. But I want to leave you with one final, kind of radical idea that might just change how you approach your writing altogether.
Just think about that for a second. Everything we're taught says the abstract comes last. It's a summary of what you've already written. But what if we flipped that completely on its head?
I know, it sounds totally backwards. But here's the logic. If you write your abstract first, you're forcing yourself to nail down the absolute core story of your research from day one. You have to know the problem, your purpose, your main result, and your conclusion before you write a single paragraph of the actual paper. It becomes your North Star, your blueprint for the entire manuscript. It keeps everything focused and ensures that every section is building towards that powerful, clear message you've already created. It's a challenge, for sure, but it might just be the most effective writing hack you ever try.